It was a Thursday evening in late October when everything changed. The kind of evening where the rain taps persistently against your windows, not in the romantic, cozy way that movies portray, but in that slightly annoying rhythm that reminds you just how alone you are. I was bundled up in my oldest sweater, the blue one with frayed sleeves that I should have thrown out years ago, but kept because it felt like an old friend. My apartment wasn't much to look at. A small one-bedroom with mismatched furniture and too many books stacked in corners. But it was mine, a sanctuary from the world that often felt too loud, too fast, too much. My name is Alex, and at 27, I was beginning to wonder if I'd ever figure out this whole adulting thing. Work had been particularly brutal that week. Deadlines piling up at the graphic design firm, where I spent my days creating logos for businesses I'd never visit. My social life wasn't faring much better. Friends were coupling up, moving to suburbs, having babies, while I was still trying to remember to water my one surviving houseplant. Dating apps had become an exercise in disappointment, and I'd recently deleted them all in what I dramatically declared to my best friend Mia was my digital cleanse. I wasn't sick, not exactly, but I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped away something essential inside me. That evening, I'd planned to do what I always did when feeling this way. Order takeout, watch something mindless on Netflix, and fall asleep on the couch by 10. The rain made the prospect of leaving my apartment completely unappealing, and I'd settled into what promised to be another forgettable night. Let me tell you why these details matter. Sometimes, the most extraordinary moments happen against the backdrop of our most ordinary days. The universe has a way of surprising us precisely when we've stopped expecting anything surprising at all. The doorbell rang at 7:36 p.m. I remember checking my phone, confused because I hadn't ordered food yet, wondering if someone had the wrong apartment. For a moment, I considered not answering. The thought of human interaction felt exhausting. But curiosity won out, as it often does, and I padded to the door in my mismatched socks, one with stripes, one with polka dots, another small rebellion against adulthood. When I opened the door, there stood Jamie, raindrops clinging to dark curls, holding what looked like a large thermos and wearing that crooked smile that always made something flutter in my chest. We'd met 3 months ago at a mutual friend's housewarming party. Jamie was the kind of person who seemed effortlessly cool, confident, but not arrogant, funny without trying too hard. We'd exchanged numbers, met for coffee twice, texted sporadically, but nothing had really developed. I'd filed Jamie away in my mind under people I'm attracted to but will probably never date. "You look terrible," were the first words out of Jamie's mouth, followed quickly by, "You look great, but also like you could use some soup." I must have looked confused because Jamie laughed, that rich sound that seemed to fill all the empty spaces. "I was making my grandmother's chicken soup recipe. It's basically magic in a bowl, and I remembered you saying you always get run down this time of year." So, Jamie lifted the thermos. I brought reinforcements. The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that for a moment I couldn't speak. When was the last time someone had shown up unannounced with homemade soup just because they thought I might need it? Had anyone ever done that? "You made me soup?" I finally managed, stepping back to let Jamie in from the rain. "Not just any soup," Jamie corrected, shaking off water like a puppy. "Healing soup. Family secret recipe passed down through generations. My grandmother swore it could cure anything from a common cold to a broken heart." I led the way to my small kitchen, suddenly aware of the dishes in the sink and the general disarray. But Jamie didn't seem to notice, already opening cabinets with a familiarity that should have felt intrusive but somehow didn't. "Bowls?" Jamie asked, and I pointed to the right cabinet. "You didn't have to do this," I said, watching as Jamie poured steaming soup into 2 bowls. The aroma filled my kitchen: chicken, herbs, something citrusy, and spices I couldn't identify. It smelled like care, like home, like something I didn't know I was missing. "I wanted to," Jamie said simply, and the straightforwardness of that statement made my chest tighten. How rare it is for people to just say what they mean, to act on a kind impulse without expectation of return. We settled on my couch, the rain still drumming against the windows, but now it seemed to create a cocoon around us rather than emphasize my solitude. The soup was indeed magical: rich broth, tender chicken, vegetables cut into perfect bite-sized pieces, and a blend of spices that warmed me from the inside out. "This is incredible," I said after my first spoonful. "Seriously, I think this might be the best soup I've ever had." Jamie's face lit up with pleasure. "The secret is the lemon zest and a pinch of saffron. Plus, you have to talk to it while you're cooking." "You talk to your soup?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "Of course. Food knows when it's made with love." Jamie said it so matter-of-factly that I couldn't even tease about it. There was something refreshing about someone who could be so unapologetically earnest. We talked as we ate, and I found myself sharing things I hadn't planned to. My frustration with work, my fear that everyone was moving forward while I was standing still, even the recurring dream I'd been having about swimming in an endless ocean. Jamie listened in a way few people do, with complete presence, asking questions that made me think, offering perspectives I hadn't considered. "You know," Jamie said, "I think sometimes we get so caught up in where we think we should be that we miss where we are. Your life doesn't have to look like anyone else's to be valuable." The simplicity and truth of that statement hit me hard. I looked at Jamie, really looked, and wondered how I'd missed seeing this depth before. Maybe I'd been too busy projecting my own insecurities, or maybe I just hadn't been ready to see. As our conversation flowed, the soup slowly disappeared. When I reached the bottom of my bowl, I felt a pang of disappointment, not just because the soup was gone, but because it felt like a marker that the evening would soon end. Jamie must have noticed, because that's when the most unexpected thing happened. "You missed some of the best part," Jamie said, dipping a spoon into the remaining broth in the pot. "The last bit is always the most flavorful." Instead of handing me the spoon, Jamie moved closer on the couch, our knees touching now, and lifted the spoon to my lips. "Open," Jamie said softly, and I did, not just my mouth, but something inside me that had been closed for a long time. The soup was indeed more flavorful, concentrated and rich, but what I remember most is the intimacy of that moment. Jamie's eyes holding mine, the gentle way the spoon pressed against my lower lip, the deliberate care in that simple act of feeding someone. I don't know what made me do it. Perhaps the soup really was magical, or maybe it was just time, but I dipped my own spoon into the pot and returned the gesture. Jamie's lips parted, accepting the offering, and something shifted in the air between us, charged with possibility. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you," Jamie confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "Feed me soup?" I asked, my attempt at humor undermined by the tremor in my voice. "Take care of you," Jamie corrected. "See you. Really see you." The honesty of that statement took my breath away. How long had I been waiting for someone to really see me? Not the version of myself I presented to the world, but the real me. Complicated, sometimes messy, full of contradictions and fears and hopes. "I'm not always easy to see," I admitted. "Sometimes I don't even know who I am." Jamie's hand found mine, warm and steady. "That's part of what makes you interesting. You're still becoming." We continued sharing the last of the soup, taking turns feeding each other, each spoonful becoming more intimate than the last. It was playful and serious at the same time, this act of nourishing and being nourished. The rain outside had softened to a gentle patter, providing a soundtrack to our growing connection. I found myself telling Jamie about my childhood, about growing up with parents who loved me but never quite understood me, about realizing I was gay at 14 and keeping it secret until college, about the first heartbreak that had left me cautious about letting people in. "What about you?" I asked, realizing how much I'd shared and how little I knew about Jamie's past. Jamie was quiet for a moment, stirring the last bit of soup thoughtfully. "My story isn't as interesting. Supportive parents. Came out in high school, dated a few people, but nothing ever quite fit. I always felt like I was waiting for something, though I couldn't have told you what." "And now?" I asked, heart beating faster. Jamie looked at me then, really looked, with an intensity that made me feel both exposed and safe. "Now I'm thinking maybe I wasn't waiting for something, but someone." The last spoonful of soup hung between us, Jamie holding it up, a question in the gesture. I leaned forward, accepting it, but this time I didn't pull back. Neither did Jamie. Our lips met, tasting of lemon and saffron and possibility. It wasn't a perfect kiss. My nose bumped against Jamie's cheek, and I was acutely aware of the soup spoon still clutched in my hand, but it was real and warm and right. When we finally pulled apart, Jamie was smiling that crooked smile that I now realized I'd been falling for since the beginning. "I've been wanting to do that since you opened your door tonight," Jamie admitted. Just tonight, I teased, feeling braver than I had in years. Maybe since that first coffee date, when you spent 10 minutes passionately defending animated movies as superior to live action. I groaned, remembering my impromptu speech. That was embarrassing. It was adorable, Jamie countered. You care about things. That's rare. We set the empty soup bowls aside, and Jamie pulled me closer, both of us sinking deeper into the couch. Outside, the rain had stopped, but neither of us moved to leave our little cocoon. Jamie's fingers traced patterns on my arm, and I found myself telling stories I hadn't thought about in years: summer camp adventures, college mishaps, the stray cat I'd befriended last winter. In turn, Jamie shared childhood memories of growing up in a small coastal town, of learning to cook from a grandmother who measured ingredients by feel rather than cups and spoons, of dreams to open a small cafe someday where food could bring people together the way it had brought us together tonight. I'd like to cook for you again, Jamie said, fingers now intertwined with mine. Maybe dinner next time? I'd like that, I replied, already imagining more evenings like this one, more shared meals, more conversations that meandered like rivers finding their way to the sea. As the night grew later, we moved from sitting to lying on the couch, Jamie's arm around me, my head resting on a shoulder that felt like it had been waiting for me. We talked about everything and nothing: favorite books, embarrassing songs we loved, places we wanted to travel, fears that kept us awake at night. Each revelation was a spoonful of nourishment, feeding something in me that had been hungry for too long. I should probably go, Jamie said eventually, though making no move to leave. It's getting late. You could stay, I offered, surprising myself with my boldness. Just to sleep, I added quickly. I'm not ready for this night to end. Jamie's smile was soft in the dim light of my living room. I'm not ready either. That night, we fell asleep in my bed, fully clothed, Jamie's arm around my waist, my back pressed against a chest that rose and fell in a rhythm that somehow matched my own. We fit together like we'd been designed that way, puzzle pieces finding their match. In the morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet humming from my kitchen. Jamie had found my ancient coffee maker and was somehow coaxing it into producing something that smelled divine. There was a moment, watching Jamie move around my kitchen with morning sunlight streaming through the windows, that I felt a certainty I'd never experienced before. This person, who had shown up at my door with soup when I didn't even know I needed it, who had fed me from their own spoon and listened to my stories and held me through the night. This person was going to matter in my life. Morning, Jamie said, noticing me in the doorway. I hope you don't mind. I thought you could use coffee almost as much as you needed soup last night. I crossed the kitchen and did what felt natural. I kissed Jamie good morning, tasting coffee and promise. I don't mind at all, I said. In fact, I could get used to this. Jamie's arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer. That's the plan. In the weeks and months that followed, soup became our thing. Jamie taught me how to make the magical family recipe, standing behind me in the kitchen, guiding my hands as I chopped vegetables and stirred broth. I learned that cooking could be a form of meditation, of love, of connection to the past, and investment in the future. We had our challenges, of course. Jamie's spontaneity sometimes clashed with my need for planning. My tendency to withdraw when stressed frustrated Jamie's desire to solve problems together. But we always came back to the soup, to the memory of that rainy night when someone cared enough to show up at my door, to feed me, to see me. A year later, when Jamie finally moved into my apartment officially, the first thing we did was make soup together in our now shared kitchen. As we fed each other the first spoonful, I thought about how nourishment comes in many forms. Food, yes, but also attention, care, presence, love. What are you thinking about? Jamie asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. About how you showed up with soup that night, I said. About how you fed me from your lips. About how sometimes the things we don't know we need find us anyway. Jamie's smile, still crooked, still able to make my heart skip, was answer enough. We had found each other, nourished each other, built something neither of us had quite believed was possible. And it had all started with soup on a rainy night, the night that everything changed. Looking back now, I realize that love often begins in these small, seemingly insignificant moments. It's not always grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes, It's just someone showing up at your door with exactly what you need before you even know you need it. Sometimes, it's the simple act of being seen, of being fed, of being cared for. Sometimes, it's soup, shared from the same spoon, creating a connection that nourishes not just the body, but the soul. And if you ever find yourself wondering if such moments are possible in your own life, let me assure you, they are. They come when you least expect them, on ordinary rainy evenings that suddenly become extraordinary. They come in the form of people who see you, really see you, and choose to stay. They come in bowls of soup made with love and intention, in spoons lifted to lips, in the quiet spaces between words where understanding grows. So the next time someone shows up at your door unexpectedly, consider opening it. You never know, they might be bringing exactly what you need. Total _char_count, 17,843.